The conversation is long overdue. I think we need a new renaissance. Hello, this is Dan, Nowman Niswander, and you are watching and listening to the Nowman Show. We are now in our ninth season. Yes, ninth season. And it started back in 2015 with the idea of being a cultural magazine variety show focusing on arts, entertainment, education, and news. And that's exactly what we've been doing. And we continue doing this. However, it has gone through an evolutionary process. And I think in the last few years, because of the pandemic, it's been transitioning. I think it's important to define the original Renaissance. The original definition of Renaissance could be defined as the revival of art and literature under the influence of classical models in the 14th, 15th, and 16th centuries. Of course, it also includes music and also philosophy, public discussion. There's a lot of things that really fall under the definition of Renaissance, and it literally means rebirth. So there's an element of enlightenment in it as well. And different aspects of it, for instance, would be the rebirth of naturalism, perspective and depth in art, non-religious themes, more privately owned art, and advancements in new technology like the printing press, and a shift in balance of power amongst the elites in Europe. And all of these different aspects can be a part of the next Renaissance or a new Renaissance, but of course in a more modern context. Let's get into that next.
Well, this is Niswander with the Nowman Show. I'm here with Congressman Kucinich. Thank you for being on the Nowman Show.
Thank you. It's good to see you.
I think we need a new Renaissance. What can we do together to help make this world a better place?
Well, if we look back to the first historical Renaissance in which people celebrate, it was a celebration of the human spirit, the human mind, of consciousness, of our ability to express ourselves in music and in song and paintings and in literature, are growing into our own multidimensionality. And I think that every historical epic requires each of us to recreate the spirit of the times and to become attuned to those sentiments which formed that Renaissance period, which gave people a feeling of joy in living and of the power of human expressiveness. But that really comes from an awareness that this inherent joy, which is our birthright, should not be muffled or stunted by the world, that we need to use it as a springboard to recreate the world in a way that is joyous.
Congressman Kucinich made some interesting points there. He talked about the celebration of consciousness and our ability to express ourselves, which he tied into the original Renaissance, which he said that we should become attuned to the sentiments that formed the original Renaissance. And how do we connect with that in the current context of a new Renaissance? Well, this is something I want to get back to later on in the episode, because I think it's part of solutions and solving problems and that kind of thing. And generally speaking, whether you're talking about an individual situation or a collective one as a whole, whenever there are problems, and I'm keeping it very simple here, it's always important to understand what those problems actually are so that you can begin to solve them. On an individual basis, obviously, it becomes very important to do that. But when you have just really complex issues, complex problems, we have to work together as a society to figure out what those problems are and how to solve them. So it is going to require some transparency. And as Kucinich said there, I mean, there really should not be censorship. Voices should not be silenced or marginalized. And we should use the idea of a renaissance as a springboard to solve these problems, and deal with these issues, so that we can have solutions, and then we can celebrate. And that is how I want to end this particular episode, in a celebratory mode. But first, let's deal with some issues. This next segment is a bit controversial for some people. Ed Dowd is a former fund manager for Black Rock, which is a very large financial institution. He's so successful in his analysis of data and how to work with assets that he did increase a certain fund from
$3 to $14 billion, and BlackRock's total assets are about 180 billion at least.
He wrote a book called Cause Unknown, and it is basically his analysis of data showing that something doesn't quite add up in the last several years here during the pandemic.
Eventually, the truth will come to light. That's why this book was written. And there seems to be word of mouth going on.
Obviously, economics is a big piece of how to identify problems on a large scale. We can go back to the 1920s, 1930s, when there was the crash of Wall Street that led to the Great Depression. Fast forward to 2001, 9/11, and all the wars that were started. And then the bailout of the banks after the downturn of the economy in the late 2000s. And that was followed by a protest movement called Occupy Wall Street, which addressed for the first time since the 1930s in public discourse that there was a growing wealth and income inequality. And at the time, the top 1% of the population had about 40% of all the wealth. A study prior to the pandemic in 2019, it was from the U.S. Congressional Budget Office, released in September of 2022, and it analyzed wealth inequality data between 1989 and 2019. And just the gist of it is that the bottom 50% of the population from 1989 to 2019 was sharing a combination of 2% of the wealth. So that's the overall wealth produced by the USA. And so that means, from 1989, which is probably about approximately 100 million people, to approximately 175 million people. Again, that's just general data based on the statistics of what the bottom 50% of the population would be, shared 2% of the whole wealth. In 2019, the top 10% shared 72% of all the wealth, and the top 1% shared 1/3 or about 33% of all the wealth. Now, that should be very shocking to many of us. Why are we allowing that to go on? And that is going to have an impact on what happens with the economy, especially when then war starts in Ukraine. $100 billion gets sent to the Ukraine when we have all these needs at home, growing homelessness problem, more and more people that cannot afford a $500 emergency. This is crisis mode, and what's being done, throw billions of dollars to Ukraine. So these are issues that we do have to look at. Like, we do need a people coming together to address this, and we need to have public dialogue about this, and really about what are the priorities in going forward. How do we do this? It's such an immense problem, but it's something that we do need to discuss. This is all food for thought, just to get the, hopefully the critical thinking skills, put them to work. And next, this is a segment with comedian John Fugelsang, who is known for doing political comedy. And I asked him the same question that I asked Congressman Kucinich.
I think we need a new renaissance. What can we do together to help make the world a better place?
Well, I mean, I know there are those who would say we're in a tech renaissance, but to make the world a better place, on a practical level, you got to get money out of politics in America. That's the square root of all of our problems. But on a bigger level, America needs love. we need more love in our hearts. We need more love we give to others. We need to receive more love from others. And I think that only when love can replace the anxiety and fear and competitiveness and strife that defines American life for so many of us, can we have the kind of society where someone won't feel so desperate enough that they'll want to take a gun and hurt a lot of people, where they'll want to outsource jobs and decimate a community, where they'll want to put low-income people in prison for consensual crimes that don't hurt anyone. I think that we need more empathy, and I think that we need more love, and I don't know how that's going to happen, but we all get to choose every day if you're going to generate more angst or more love, and I think that's the sort of thing that has to be done on a very personal, individual, one-by-one level.
I agree, and we can start doing that right now.
Joe Martino is a podcaster with the website called Collective Evolution. And earlier I talked about identifying problems and then coming up with solutions so we can solve those problems on a larger scale as well as individually. He refers to this process as sense making.
At the end of the day, we need to see clearly what is going on if we want to make good decisions, right? We got to have a reminder of that there. If we want to know what is the pathway to creating a better society, what is the pathway to solving problems, what is the pathway to even healing within ourselves, let's say, we need to have a good understanding of what's actually going on, right? So good decisions come from good sense making. So I hope it's really clear that how important this topic is, because all of the things that we think are important in the world, climate change, whatever, all these different things that we might be activists about, the only way to solve it is through good, high-quality sense-making. Otherwise, we have no idea what we're doing. So if you think that what I'm talking about is not overly important, it's incredibly important. It is literally the foundation through which so many things that we're going to do and we're going to see are going to come from. And if we have no ability to clearly make sense of what's going on, we then have no ability to communicate what is actually going on and get people on the same page to then take action. Right? If we think we understand something very loosely and we're trying to communicate it to people and people are looking at us like, what the hell are you even talking about? Then at the end of the day, we're not going to get on the same page, right? We're going to start going in different directions all over the place. And I hope it's clear from some of the other things I said, this is not about just moving from mainstream media to alternative media. Let the mainstream media die. Alternative media is the new mainstream. That's the future, right? That's not going to solve the problem either, because we see there are tons of issues within the alternative sphere as well, because this process of sense making is not that there's good sense making in the alternative and bad in the mainstream. It's that there's bad sense making all over the place, but there is signal in different places. And what we want to do is we want to up the amount of signal in the long run, but in the short term, we want to up everybody's ability to make sense better, to communicate what they're saying better, so that the amount of signal in somebody's work is increased and the amount of noise is actually decreased, right? That's the long-term plan here as we continue to move forward.
John Fugelsang referred to love. Obviously, that is something that and empathy is something that we all need to have more of. I think some of the ways to create community are intentional communities. It goes beyond just, as Martino said, creating alternative media. We do have to form in groups, starting with smaller groups, creating intentional communities, at least move closer to each other if we're all spread out all over the place. And maybe getting a piece of land somewhere and still have access to certain resources, but you could also have a community garden, learn how to grow your own food, educate each other, use mutual aid to help one another. And you do that more and more as you get to know each other better in that intentional community. In some cases where some people have more economic benefits than others, paying it forward also applies. It may get to the point where you want to create businesses together. Worker-owned cooperatives, also sometimes called worker self-directed enterprises, which is a term that Professor and economist Richard Wolff has used to describe them. It's basically an enterprise that each person who is the worker also is an owner, and each person gets one vote on all the most important decisions. If you can get full consent, do it, go for it. And otherwise, at least get a large majority for a consensus and at least a democratic majority of at least 51%. And if you don't like it, you can always change it in a week, a month, a year, however you want to do that. That's the sociocratic process. And you can use that in sense making within your intentional community, or however, well, whatever group situation, maybe work or own cooperative, whatever works. And in the past, there have been groups that have created their own currencies, for instance, in Ithaca, New York, and in the UK, that even made its own pound note with David Bowie Aladdin Sane on it instead of the Queen. And there's also gold and silver. Never rule that out. It's not a digital currency, right? Like what China and other countries are already implementing right now. It's called central bank digital currencies. We want to have more control of our own lives. We don't want to be controlled by cybersecurity, where a handful of people know everything about us, what we're buying, where we are. It's crazy. At some point, we have to say the World Economic Forum is not the future world that we see for our cities and our communities. You know, we don't have to have their version of the fourth industrial revolution, or their version of the Internet of Things. As Eckhart Tolle has said,
we are going through a period of increasing insanity collectively. It's like an illness, collective illness, mental illness that's overtaken a significant section of humanity. Sometimes this happens. People go, not only individuals, but also collectives. They go through periods of insanity. And this is what we're moving into now. We are being challenged to wake up so that the egoic consciousness can be transcended. The crisis point is also a great opportunity for moving out of the egoic state. It's been around for thousands of years and it had its function, it's fine, but coming to an end now. It's self-destructing. The ego is about to self-destruct. And so we will experience a great reset, but not in the way it's been planned by certain groups or organizations. They will be very surprised. It will be a very different reset from the one that they may be planning.
Yes, I see, Eckhart, now the significance of individual awakening and the impact that it can have on a culture, particularly as it is evident that there is a unitary force of some kind unfolding, unraveling, even as we speak, and that our individual foundation, having a foundation on the permanent rather than the impermanent, temporal and ever shifting, will be a great asset as these transitions continue to occur. And to your point earlier, Eckhart, this is precisely why I believe I've been drawn again, as I was once earlier in my life, into the concept of activism and critiquing power structures, because the function of our channel is to articulate the connection between individual awakening, collective action, and our ability, when unified, to challenge current power systems and create new systems based on this true foundation.
When he did The Planet is Fine, that was in 1992 on his Jammin' in New York show. And it was very controversial because, you know, he wasn't saying don't try to save the planet, but he was saying the only reason you're trying to save the planet is because you're trying to save your life, your convenient life. Like, let's just get real about it.
Ego. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, you know, you're trying to save it so that you're not inconvenienced anymore. And if you really want to save the planet, then we would stop driving cars.
Yes.
And we would stop eating beef. You know, I mean, like those two things would probably save the planet right now. We would probably be okay if we could do those two things.
That's right.
But we're really not interested in that. So, and now with all of our devices, you know, it's just so, anyway, so, you know, he warned us about all of this. He saw it all coming. It's all about greed, and greed is all about ego. So it's all about, you know, I want to make sure I have enough for me and my family. And we really haven't gotten past that.
These should be some ideas for you to think about how we could realistically, you know, start to create that new renaissance. And then once we do see some progress along the way, we can celebrate. We can celebrate consciousness, because consciousness is really what we are. We are spiritual beings. We are consciousness, and together we are one whole, and that includes everyone. and not just a small group of individuals that want to basically control the whole narrative. We are all essential to the completeness of this universe, and there is universal law. And this enlightenment will bring us together. As Ed Dowd so clearly says in this next clip.
Yeah, I believe a renaissance is on the other side. So from all great evils, great goods usually come. It's a cycle of human history. Unfortunately, we've had a great evil the last couple decades, and on the other side, we'll have a renaissance, is my hope.
And finally, Jimmy Dore, the comedian, was also asked this question on the Nowman Show.
I think we need a new renaissance.
Okay.
What can we do together to make the world a better place?
I think more Renaissance fairs. That would help. People always like, would ye like some chicken on a stick? You know, something like that. What can we do to bring the world together? Maybe we should do one of those hands across the world. Remember we did Hands Across America? Remember that? Right. We are the world. Maybe something like that. Maybe we get some, maybe Beyonce and Jay-Z could put together something like that. I have no idea how we can bring people together. I really don't. I would say music.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Comedy's too cultural. Music kind of transcends.
That's true. That's a very good point.
Literally, the Renaissance is also about the arts. It is also about the expression and sharing that with others, because it is vital that we have interesting culture, not a mediocre one, that stimulates our imagination and brings more joy into our experiences. So let's celebrate. This is a new song. Quite appropriately, the song is called A New Renaissance. Until next time, this is Dan, Nowman Niswander. Stay present in the moment, now and always. Love, peace, and joy.
In the inspiration of Freddie Mercury and all piano players that like to rock, this is New Renaissance. When something seems to be missing, the society of human behavior is on the brink of insanity, with a passion for hope and not just to cope with persistent pessimism, dreams of expression to replace the oppression, creating optimism. We need a new renaissance where music and art we can find. We need a new renaissance, theater of the sublime. We need a new renaissance, be more generous and kind. We need a new renaissance, something for the heart and the mind. The mind. I'd like to read a book, a song that has a hook, 17 sunny places. I want to read a book, well, there's always a story to find, something kind of any kind, not just look at the pictures. What I mean, I want to read a book. Ooh, oh, oh, sing along. I want to read a book. Ooh, oh, I want to read a book. Ooh, oh, I want to read a book. Ooh, oh, I want to read a book.
Thank you very much. I love you.
Matt Fetcher.
New Renaissance. In the modern context, there are a lot of possibilities. We can not only begin talking about it, we can start creating the reality of a new Renaissance, making it real now. And of course, that's going to include the arts and culture. It's going to include individuality, because we are, as artists, we are writers, right? We are performers, musicians, players, actors, whatever, painters, whatever it is that you're doing. it's very individualistic, but it's also important to realize that we are part of a whole. It's all one whole. Like it's one universe, one consciousness. What do you think? Because this involves all of us, in not only in the discussion, but in the planning, the process of making this new Renaissance a real reality. And it also includes, things, like public opinion, public discussion. It includes economics, what connects us all, what is community, spiritual enlightenment. I mean, that's consciousness. We are all connected. And especially with the internet, we have seen how we can connect with people all around the world, in some cases instantaneously. It truly is amazing in many ways. But we have to be good stewards of this technology. And that's another reason why we need discussion, we need planning. And we need to stay also connected to nature, which is why I'm doing this outside. I can look at the sun and I can see that's something that represents eternity. How do we make a community so we're feeling more connected and we're not so isolated? How do we bring out more of the artistic, creative, enlightened kind of content and the mutual aid, share resources and use skills or whatever it is, that resources that we have available together to make the world better for everyone. I think I need to liven this up a little bit. How about let's do that? This is more like it. I do have a little commercial. I have a couple albums. First of all, you can get on iTunes. The first one, Revolution of the Heart, includes Surfing with Jesus, a song, Funky Space, that, well, the live audience at Pasadena Civic Auditorium saw it twice. 2 live audiences on America's Got Talent in March of 2020, even though you only really got a little snippet of it on national television. I also have Compassion, which I did re-release, a live version in 2022, I believe, that you can also find on iTunes. And my second album, which is Adventures in Wonderland, that includes the theme song of the Nowman Show, as well as Nowman, the superhero of the present moment, fun to the nth degree. Read a book, as well as Mojo and Hats and The Poet Speaks, and I've got to Love You This Way, tribute to the Beatles, Summer in My Mind, and a whole lot more. And a book, What Goes On in the Mind of a Superhero, the universe according to Nowman, listed as Nowman Niswander. You can get that on Barnes & Noble's online. Be sure to watch the Nowman Show on the Arroyo channel on YouTube. You can also find content on Rumble, and we'll have blogs and things like that, like this Spontaneous. Let me know what you think. What do you think of the shirt? Staying present in the moment is very important. And we are all one as consciousness. It really is simple. It's one universe, one universal law, and not duality. And I think that's one of the things that I want to get into more with the TV show and even music to a certain extent, is to focus more on the fact that this is not a dualistic experience. We really are all one. Contemplate that for a while. Continuing this conversation, New Renaissance, there's a lot more to get into. Stay present in the moment always. Peace and love. Enjoy.